Welcome back to Libraryish, the podcast where we talk about libraries, books, and the many ways libraries connect people to information, history, and each other.
February is Black History Month, and this year we wanted to take a slightly different approach than we have in the past. Instead of focusing on individual figures, today we're talking about spaces, specifically the history of Black reading spaces.
Because long before equal access to public libraries existed, Black communities were already creating places to read, learn, share stories, and preserve knowledge, often in the face of very real barriers.
We do want to say up front, we are not historians and we are not experts in the subject. We're library professionals who believe deeply in access to information. This episode is meant to share what we've learned and to help point people toward trusted resources if they want to explore this history further.
We'll be talking about reading during enslavement, community created reading spaces during segregation, informal spaces like churches, homes, barbershops, and salons, and how those traditions connect to libraries and archives today.
This episode isn't meant to be exhaustive. It's meant to be an invitation to learn more, to ask questions, and to recognize how powerful reading and access to information have always been.
So let's talk about the history of Black reading spaces and why reading has always been an act of community, resilience, and resistance.
Let's go. Okay, so Black reading spaces. This is Black History Month, and generally we focus on people, individuals who have had an impact. But today we really wanted to focus on the history of Black reading spaces because it's not necessarily it's a story about overcoming obstacles, really,
It
in
really
the end
is.
result.
Because there's been so many obstacles. And even when you
Mhm.
get one little, it's like one step forward, two steps back, one step forward.
Mhm.
And you have to fight for those steps that you're getting, and
Mhm.
very slowly you make it up there. And even now in modern times, it's not equality. We're not
Absolutely.
absolutely equal to one
No,
another.
these things like anti-literacy laws and the suppression of third spaces
Mm-hmm.
continues even now systemically within various communities. And
Mm-hmm.
these are still barriers to access
Very
that
much.
need to be addressed and overcome,
Mm-hmm.
which is why dialogue like this is so important. As we said in the introduction, this isn't a comprehensive overview. This is really just us having a discussion about what we know,
Mm-hmm.
what we think the impacts are. And, we recognize we are not the experts on this topic. We are not the people talking from direct experience.
No.
So we can only talk from an academic point of view.
Mm-hmm.
However, this is still a conversation that needs to be had. And that's what we're doing. We're exploring this as deeply as we can, learning as much as we can, making mistakes along the way, of course, and hopefully encouraging you to learn more yourself. That's the
Mm-hmm.
thing, is don't think you know when you don't know. So that's where we're
Yeah,
coming
and
from.
knowing that you don't know is a big step in itself.
Yeah.
I feel being big enough to be like, I don't know about that.
Yes.
I'm not an expert. I don't know. And you know what? I'd like to learn more.
It's the first step. It's a Lulu, but it's the first step. So, what happens when people are denied access to books, education, and
Mm-hmm.
libraries? You know, Black reading spaces existed long before the institution of
Mm-hmm.
public libraries.
Very.
And reading, and this is part of the obstacle, reading has always been connected to self determination
Mm-hmm.
and survival and resilience.
Oh gosh.
And, that's part of why many of the obstacles that were experienced were put in place.
And the ability to read is such an important skill. I went to, we have our literacy department provides
Mhm.
tutoring lessons for adults who don't know how to read.
Mhm.
And you can volunteer to be a tutor in this thing. You go down to Orville and you do an all day training and where they teach you.
It's
And
really a
it
fantastic,
is
rewarding
absolutely.
experience.
And then you can be a volunteer tutor and help someone else learn how to read. Well, I went down this past weekend and I did a tutor training so that I could be a tutor here for any Paradise residents that need a little help in reading. And we were talking about all the benefits that we don't even consider because we
Mhm.
know how to read. You know, the things that people who struggle with reading can't do, basic
Mhm.
things that they
Well,
just
and the
can't
fact that we
do.
have public education and it's
Hmm.
so ubiquitous, it makes us take for granted the
What a
fact
gift it
you
is.
assume, yet
Right.
literacy levels, including here in Butte County, are
Are
actually
so low.
shockingly low.
Yes.
Mhm.
And but it's such a gift, and it's a gift that people back during that point in time fought for, really struggled for, and we just nowadays just take it so much for
Yeah.
granted, and it just kills me. But yeah, if you're an adult that needs a little help in reading, or you know of an adult that needs a little help in reading,
Yeah,
we
please
yeah we offer
reach
that
out.
program here, and it's free. And
Mhm.
a big piece of it is a non-judgmental space, and I know this because I just went through a training for it. But yeah, it's they emphasize that we're in a non-judgmental space. We're not here to judge you, we're here
Mhm.
to help you. So if you know someone that needs help reading, if you know someone,
Mhm.
or you yourself are someone that's like, I don't know how to read very well, I'm
Mhm.
embarrassed by it, come on down, give us a call.
And, we provide this as one-on-one training, it's not
Hmm.
like group training. Uh, if you are not in the Butte County area, reach out to your local public library.
They
They may
probably do
have
it
a
too.
similar
Hmm.
program going on there. And if you're somebody who's passionate about literacy, reach out. Maybe you can volunteer. And maybe it's an opportunity for you to start something in your community
Hmm.
and help build literacy among the people that you live with
Yeah,
in your community.
because it's a necessary skill.
Oh,
Hmm.
100%, 100%. So we're
Hmm.
going to start off with reading during enslavement. During this period of time, there were many anti-literacy practices
Hmm.
that were implemented. Slave owners often restricted slaves from having the smallest amount of information. Um, they couldn't necessarily even be aware of their own age.
Oh
They
my
couldn't
gosh.
necessarily be aware of their birth parents' names or
Right.
who their birth parents even were.
Hmm.
Uh, any information about their family of origin was withheld. Um, Personal identity was stripped from these people because they didn't want them to have access to that information to be able to use it to be able to achieve their own freedom. It's the same thing with like freedom papers. They didn't want people to be able to know how to read because they didn't, or to write because they didn't want them to be able to forge documents that would be allow them to travel. Now, this happens to be mostly in the South where these anti literacy laws existed.
Hmm.
Between 1740 and 1834, anti literacy laws existed in Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, North and South Carolina, and Virginia.
Oh my
The first law
goodness.
was passed in South Carolina, and this absolutely prohibited teaching to slaves uh, for reading and writing. It was a fine of £100 and 6 months in prison.
Oh my goodness.
Um, the need for anti literacy laws was actually pushed by slave owners onto the abolitionists' backs because what they said was if the abolitionists weren't pushing so hard for anti slavery laws, they would not need to institute anti literacy
Oh
laws.
my gosh.
Why these very strict anti literacy laws existed in the South, that doesn't mean the North was much better. Now, in New England, as an example,
Uh-huh.
they were teaching fundamental reading and writing to enslaved populations, but that
Mhm.
was because they felt that it made them more efficient workers. They could put them more in a position of sort of foreman,
Mhm.
taking shipments, counting what's being done, reporting on the day's
Yeah.
labors and so forth in a way that could be entered into a ledger. It made them more useful. Frederick Douglass was in a household. The person that owned him at the time was Hugh Auld, and Hugh's wife Sophia was teaching Frederick Douglass how to read. And when he discovered this fact, Hugh Auld wrote a letter to her, and because he was terrified about the consequences that they would pay for teaching someone how to read, for teaching a Black child how to read, and said he should know nothing but the will of his master and learn to obey it. As to himself, learning will do him no good, but a great deal of harm, making him disconsolate and unhappy. If you teach him how to read, he'll want to know how to write. And this accomplished, he'll be running away with himself. This goes back to the idea that once you learn how to read, you're going to learn how to write, and you're going to make sure that you secure your freedom. By reading, people are going to be able to find legal loopholes. They're going to be able to read about the Constitution. They're going to be able to read about the disparity between the way they're treated and the way other populations are treated. You're giving them the tools to be able to enact the changes. That's how legislation gets changed.
Yeah.
That's how businesses are built, through words and legislation.
Yeah.
That's where money comes from. You're removing access to those things by one simple act of preventing people from reading and writing.
Well, yeah, because when you rebel and when you fight back and all those things, if you do it in a physical manner, and especially back then, they would look at you and be like, see, you're a savage, you know. But if you play the game and if you follow the rules and if you change within, like you change the system from within, then it's looked at much differently. You know, you're actually doing what you're supposed to. You're following the rules. You're changing the system.
This is what happened. People just went ahead and just made it their business to learn how to read. And once Black people learn how to read and started advocating for themselves, fleeing to places where they had more freedom, using their ability to write to forge those papers, getting to where they'd be more safe than they were before, they started newspapers, they started reading spaces, they started, once information was accessible, their need and their desire for information was insatiable. Now, unfortunately, because so much of this had to be done on the down low, there isn't the data available to be able to know exactly how many spaces were created. We know how many newspapers were published. We know the content. A lot of those things still exist, but even that was a later development to some of the earlier spaces. In 1829, in Savannah, Georgia, police seized 60 copies of an abolitionist, a Black abolitionist's work. His name was David Walker. The book was titled Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World. It had been published 3 months earlier, and this was a scathing critique of white institutions and of their concerted effort to block Black people from getting information. But it also exposed, Black persons caught smuggling the literature into ports or across state borders were being executed. Undercover police officers were deployed to ferret out these rings of distributing literature. I mean, when you think about someone getting the death penalty for reading a book, like, this isn't like, oh, we talk about Banned Book Day and we talk about it as sort of like, oh no, we're banning books and oh, it's such a difficult thing. People were literally dying.
Yeah.
People were literally being murdered by the state for sharing books.
Oh, see, it sounds dystopian and it sounds so far separated. It's really a quick jump. I mean, just saying, just throwing that out there and watching it flop around. And
it was within a year of that publication that North Carolina first published its anti-literacy laws. And then that started the domino effect throughout the South of these anti-literacy laws. after emancipation, there was a huge movement toward reading, and church became education hubs. There were mutual aid societies and literacy clubs were huge. This was a method that was used before public libraries by white communities also, where you would have literacy societies that would focus on a particular topic, and then they would discuss that topic among themselves and collect literature that would be available to the entire group. Well, Black Americans were doing the exact same thing, but having to do it in a more in a more discreet way than the white Americans were.
Even though it was legal now.
Even though it was legal, technically, it was still something that had to be done discreetly because, you know, any sort of achievement on the part of Black Americans is always damped down by some authority figure.
Oh my
historically.
Goodness. Yeah, no, that,
you know, whether it's financial success,
right,
you know, real estate, like a town becoming successful, whatever, there's always been a lid put on that.
Phyllis Wheatley, she was this this wonderful Black American poet, and her poetry is so good. Congress forced her to come in and testify to prove that she was the person writing that, because no, it had to be written by a white person. This poetry this good needed to be written by a white person, and so they called Phyllis Wheatley in, and they had her prove
and when
that
was like, what period was this?
I want to say 1700s,
yeah,
maybe 18. Yeah, but no, they, to prove that it was her poetry, that she could create something that literally literate and beautiful. I'm so sorry, my and she had all these rich white men were like, no, prove it. And it's just it's obscene, that behavior.
But you know, talking about the societies and churches, one of the key things that was so important after abolition to for Black people and literacy was the existence of third spaces. The thing about third spaces, which, hi, as a library, this is what we are a third space. Which sociologically, a third space refers to social surroundings that are separate from the two usual social environments, or I would say the two primary social environments, home and work. The third place can be anywhere else where people congregate. That could be church, cafe, bar, libraries, gyms, bookstores, hacker spaces, the stoop, parks, theaters. These are all third spaces.
I like that the stoop is a part of that.
Yes, isn't that? I mean, the street corner, the stoop, those are all like very important places where people gather. And the thing about third places is they gather, people communicate, and people share ideas. And it even comes into the modern era. Barbershops, hair salons, bookstores. These are all places where people come and they share ideas.
We talked about in our last, about a year ago this time, we did a Black librarianship episode. And back then we were talking about the ALA and how it wasn't always an acceptable place that accepted, you know, Black reading spaces and stuff like that. They wanted it very separate from everybody else. And it absolutely kills me. It's just,
libraries, public libraries in their inception were very much white spaces. Luckily that changed. You know, during the segregation era, libraries existed, but they were closed to Black people. They were whites only. Very often in the North, they might have days where they allowed Black people to come in and check things out or read, not necessarily check things out, but give them access to the material on particular days during particular hours. But it wasn't until the 20th century, really, that you had Black librarians becoming part of the conversation and really working on integrating the spaces so that everyone was invited.
Yes, there was one, Regina Anderson Andrews, who I thought was very interested. And she was in Harlem. And this was back when it was separate. It was, you had the library branches for Black Americans and you had the library branches for white Americans. And she only, out of all the libraries in the state of New York, 2 were were the ones that she was allowed to work at. What she did, though, is she created a third space for her patrons in her own home. She
Mm-hmm.
started this where she would invite speakers, and she would invite performers, and she would invite all these people.
It's like she was the first programming
Yes,
librarian.
yes, that's why I like her so much. And she would have these things in her home. She would make a third space out of
Mm-hmm.
her own apartment for these people to connect and to trade ideas, and because you do the best you can with what you have
Yeah.
until you can fight to make it better.
Yeah.
And that's what she did, and she was absolutely amazing. And an activist, W.E.B. Du Bois,
Mm-hmm.
he would fight for her as well, because when it came to promote, she could
Yes.
only promote within those library systems, even though people that were less qualified, as long as they were white, would get promoted far above her. The same thing happened with Josie, the man we talked about that was involved in the first Black Caucus in the ALA.
Yes.
He watched white people get promoted above him, even though he
Oh,
was
yes.
far more qualified for the
Mhm.
positions. But yeah, you do the best with what you have until you are able to fight for better. And I think that's
Mhm.
what they did, and that's what she did when she created that third space in her home
Mhm.
for this purpose.
That's right. I mean, and there were also freedom libraries. These existed,
Mhm.
though, mostly in Mississippi and the South,
Yeah.
and bookmobiles that focused on delivering
Mhm.
literature to Black communities.
Mhm.
But it was definitely, and it wasn't like separate but equal. It was entirely unequal.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Authors Wayne and Shirley Wiegland have written extensively about the desegregation efforts within public libraries, and about how it was very much young people who did the protests about the segregation of public libraries, very much like the protests against the segregated lunch counters and segregated public transportation. It really fell to young people to highlight the issue. And Black newspapers played a huge role
Mhm.
in uh, publicizing the efforts of these young people to get libraries desegregated,
Mhm.
but also into maintaining the history so that we know today about their efforts. Because without the Black newspapers,
Mhm.
without those archives, all of that information would be
Mhm.
lost today.
Yeah.
Um, it's a much larger story, and they've written a book on the issue about the desegregation of libraries, and I
Mhm.
think it's definitely well worth
Well worth the
the
read.
time and the examination. Let's touch a little bit on Black colleges and archives and HBCUs. Um, these are where Black reading spaces became formalized.
Mhm.
Um, they sort of rose up after the Civil War, because higher education for Black Americans basically didn't exist
Yeah.
as an entity. And the idea of separate but equal was very much a part of the lexicon at that time.
Mhm.
And so they were where scholarship, research, debate, and cultural production could happen openly for Black Americans, where
Mhm.
they could get access to that information and get access to that activation of their
Mhm.
own genius and their own talents.
Mhm.
Um, and throughout time, these have also been the places that have archived
Yeah.
the history of Black
Mhm.
participation in culture, in American culture.
Well, remember what you said earlier regarding a lot of this information, and you used this delightful term from the 90s. It's all on the down low.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's a lot of it that we don't know because they couldn't get caught.
yes, 100%. And you know, we talked in our episode about Black History Month last year when we were
Mhm.
talking about Black librarians.
Mhm.
Up until a certain point, any book written by or about Black people in America,
Mhm.
there was one catalog number. It was
Yep.
like 364.4 or something. There were like
Yep.
one or two places
Mhm.
where all of those books went. They did
Thank you,
not go.
Mr. Dewey.
Yeah, yeah, but it was like the consensus was we're going to put that all in one place. So we're going to keep it separate from everything else. We're going to put it all in
Yeah.
that one place so no one has to encounter it unless they're looking for it.
Oh my, we'd all be clutching our pearls.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, for accessibility, that's great. You know where to go. But it
It's not
separates it from the
accurate.
context of
No.
American culture. And the thing about it was an academic librarian. I can't think of her name right
Dorothy
now.
Porter?
Hmm?
No, I was thinking Dorothy Porter. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it might have been. I
Okay.
can't remember her name. But she was the person that said, we're going to codify this in a way that the achievements of Black Americans in this particular field don't get overlooked.
Yeah.
That they are recognized
Mhm.
within the field, not separately in
No.
this little corner so that they can be segregated out. And that's part of where HBCUs have played a critical role in terms of first collecting this information and preserving it, but also updating and updating the way we treat this information, bringing it into the mainstream. And like you say, going from this is all separate, this is all something that we're keeping in a corner, to now this has to be confronted as equal with everything else in this field. The value cannot be denied. We cannot whitewash the value of this particular contribution that has been made. Now the modern age, reading spaces today, right? There are community reading rooms, book clubs, there are online book clubs, in-person book clubs. In larger cities, you have you could go into libraries and they're exploring the local culture. So, we're all very focused on that and highlighting what's going on in the local community. Serving the local community is so important. But I got the names of several bookstores because I think that in an age where Amazon is so ubiquitous, yes, the Black bookstore is so important as a reading space, as a place to congregate, as a source of education, place to get, hear Black voices, find Black authors. They're mostly in the most prominent bookstores are in the larger cities.
Yeah.
You've got the Lit Bar in the Bronx. You've got Mahogany Books in Washington, D.C.
That's a great name.
Isn't it great? And you've got Semicolon Bookstore in Chicago.
His name is Semicolon?
Yes.
I love it.
Isn't it great? For Keeps Books, that's in Atlanta, Georgia. They actually focus on rare and classic Black literature. Harriet's Bookshop in Philadelphia. Uncle Bobby's Coffee and Books in Philadelphia.
I want to go.
Yes, I know, right? Uncle Bobby's calls itself a Black space for Black people. I love it. Love it. This is with Book Talk and with all the social media spaces that we have today. It's great that there are IRL spaces, in real life spaces, that highlight Black achievements in literature, and that provide that space for people to come and explore.
Because you know what? Everybody needs a space of their own.
Yes.
Everybody needs a space.
Yes.
As we wrap up today's episode, we want to come back to something we mentioned at the beginning. This conversation is a starting point, not a finish line.
The history of Black reading spaces is deep, complex, and incredibly important. We've shared what we can here, but there is so much more to explore and so many voices worth hearing directly.
If you'd like to learn more, we strongly encourage checking out trusted institutions that preserve and share this history, including the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, the Library of Congress's African American History Collections, and the HBCU Library Alliance.
These organizations do the work of preserving documents, oral histories, newspapers, and stories that might otherwise have been lost. And they make much of that material accessible to the public.
And of course, your local library is also a great place to start. Librarians can help you find books, documentaries, databases, and primary sources if you'd like to dig deeper.
Black History Month is about learning, listening, and continuing to engage with history, not just during the month of February, but all year long.
Thank you for spending time with us today, for being curious, and for supporting libraries as places where learning history and community continue to meet.
Until next time, keep reading, keep asking questions, and we'll see you next time on Library Ish.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.